The Civil War, the war that settled one of the largest controversies of the 19th century in the United States. While the Union and the Confederacy both fought for their causes, the Union claimed its victory in 1865, a victory which can be attributed to the Union's generals, one of whom was William Tecumseh Sherman, from the state of Ohio. Sherman, only a colonel at the start of the Civil War, partook in many famous battles, such as the First Battle of Bull Run, the first major battle of the Civil War, the Battle of Shiloh, after which he was promoted to Major General of the Volunteer Army, the Battle of Vicksburg, which Sherman was asked to lead after a successful assault on Arkansas Post, the Battle of Collierville, in which Sherman's army of 550 men defended against a Confederate army more than 6 times larger than its own size, the Battle of Chattanooga, in which Sherman quickly captured his assigned target, Billy Goat Hill, and the Battle of Meridian, seen by many as a prelude to his more famous Savannah campaign, better known as the March to the Sea. William Tecumseh Sherman, now a Major General of the Volunteer Army for nearly 2 years, received a promotion in which he became the Major General for the regular army, after which he proceeded to invade the state of Georgia with 3 armies, the Army of the Cumberland, the Army of the Tennessee, and the Army of the Ohio, with approximately 100,000 troops altogether. The Battle of Kenesaw Mountain was fought during the Atlanta campaign of the American Civil War. It was perhaps the most significant frontal assault launched by William Tecumseh Sherman against the Confederate Army of Tennessee. After a long battle, Sherman's Atlanta campaign successfully concluded with the capture of the city of Atlanta, which Confederate General John Bell Hood had been forced to abandon. This success made Sherman a well-known name and helped ensure Abraham Lincoln's presidential re-election in November. Being one of his most trusted men, Sherman shared many war strategies with his friend, Ulysses S. Grant, the commander of the Union Army, which would ultimately lead to the successful yet harsh run of the Union during the American Civil War. They believed that there was no way the war would end if they didn't sever the Confederacy's strategic, economic, and psychological ability. Sherman called it hard war. They needed to completely annihilate the South. Sherman's strategic capabilities allowed him to lead his 62,000-man army down into the heart of the South. This was a revolutionary strategy in which he fought deep within enemy territory, preventing him and his army from any sort of contact with the North. Due to this lack of communication, the troops held no supplies. Sherman's leadership skills helped keep the army alive as they lived off the land for over a month. The famous march began in Atlanta, which Sherman had recently conquered. He knew that if he had simply marched his entire army straight from Atlanta to Savannah, there would be a smaller chance for success, so he decided to split his army into 2 wings, each taking a completely separate route to Savannah, destroying everything of value to the Confederacy in their path. The first wing was the Army of the Tennessee, commanded by Major General Oliver Otis Howard. The second wing was the Army of Georgia, commanded by Major General Henry Warner Slocum. Sherman, on the other hand, was personally escorted by the 1st Alabama Cavalry Regiment, a unit of Southerners who remained loyal to the Union. In between these 2 columns there was a cavalry division led by Brigadier General Judson Kilpatrick, which alternated between the 2 armies. This provided a balance between the 2 wings of the army, even with as little as 5,000 cavalry units supporting the 55,000 infantry forces.
December 10th. Sherman's army finally reaches the city of Savannah, 25 days after the beginning of the 300-mile march. To their surprise, they found William Hardee's 10,000-man Confederate army blocking any access to the U.S. Navy, which was carrying supplies for Sherman and his army. 3 days later, when Major General Oliver Otis Howard arrived with the Army of the Tennessee, Sherman ordered an attack on Fort McAllister, which was conquered in a mere 15 minutes, allowing Sherman access to the Navy. Once Sherman received his supplies, he sent a message to William Hardee, the leader of the nearby Confederate army, in which he said, "I have already received guns that can cast heavy and destructive shots as far as the heart of your city. Also, I have for some days held and controlled every avenue by which the city and garrison of Savannah can be supplied, and I am therefore justified in demanding the surrender of the city of Savannah and its dependent forts, and shall wait a reasonable time for your answer before opening with heavy ordnance." On December 20th, 10 days after the arrival of Sherman and his army, William Hardy decided to flee rather than surrender, prompting the mayor of Savannah, Richard Dennis Arnold, to make the decision himself. Mayor Arnold exchanged the key of the city for the protection of his people, allowing Sherman to occupy the city that same day. Sherman immediately telegraphed President Lincoln, where he famously offered him the city of Savannah as a Christmas gift. Sherman moved on to capture the state capital of South Carolina, Columbia, on February 17, 1865. Fires began that night, and by next morning, most of the city was destroyed. The burning of Columbia has created controversy ever since, with some claiming the fires were accidental, others saw it as an intentional act of vengeance, and others believed that the retreating Confederates burned bales of cotton on their way out of town. Sherman is quoted as having said afterwards, "I did not order the burning of the city, but I am not sorry that it happened." After capturing Columbia, Sherman's army proceeded to cross the Lumber River into North Carolina with the help of Lumbee Native American guides. Sherman's last significant military action was the Battle of Bentonville. Sherman's victory over the armies of Joseph E. Johnston resulted in his surrender. Johnston's surrender, combined with that of Robert E. Lee earlier that year, effectively ended the war. Despite his many triumphs, Sherman remains a very controversial figure in American history to this day. Just like any other war, there are two stories to tell. Sherman's side of the story, shared by many Northerners today, makes Sherman out to be the ultimate American hero. Sherman is seen by some as the man who ultimately ended the Civil War with his march to the sea. Sherman, also called Uncle Billy by his men, had an amazing relationship with everyone he dealt with, from the lowest ranking troop to the Presidents of the United States, Abraham Lincoln and Ulysses S. Grant. While acknowledging his harsh and merciless tactics, most Northerners believe it was of the utmost importance to apply these tactics if they truly wanted to win the war. Allowing the South to remain intact would allow them to rebuild too quickly. Destroying the South was the only way to ensure total victory and avoid rebuttal. The Confederacy side of the story, on the other hand, is unsurprisingly the exact opposite. Many Southerners today view Sherman as nothing more than a villain who destroyed their homeland. When Sherman left the South, everyone's lives had changed. They had their entire cities to rebuild. Sherman and his troops, called the Little Devils by the Confederates, left physical damage that dug the Confederates into an even deeper ditch after losing the war. The Little Devils destroyed everything from cotton to railroad tracks. They are most famously known for their railway destruction tactic known as Sherman's neckties, a strategy where railroad tracks are twisted around trees into loops resembling neckties. These are all factors that contribute to the infamous figure of William Tecumseh Sherman in the American South. Many people around the South are taught to hate Sherman, as many articles speak about the way he ordered troops to shoot civilians at random, and how his attacks were not restrained only to men and women, but children as well. Finally, another perspective of Sherman's legacy is that of the African Americans. Accompanying Sherman's army on his march to the sea were an estimated 10,000 black refugees and freed slaves. Sherman's Special Field Orders No. 15 was what made him so popular to these freed slaves. In this order, he confiscated 400,000 acres of land along the coast of Florida, Georgia, and South Carolina, dividing it into 40-acre plots. This is most commonly known as 40 acres and a mule. Although Sherman said nothing about giving each family a mule, some of the families did actually receive one. As of June 1865, there were over 40,000 freed slaves living in these areas. Although these orders were revoked shortly after by President Andrew Johnson, Sherman remains an important figure to many African Americans today due to his progressive involvement in post-slavery economics.